Lucas Bennett, a celebrated tech entrepreneur with an insatiable drive for success, stood at the entrance of the Grand Manhattan Ballroom. The annual charity gala was his familiar playground, a venue where deals were sealed over glasses of champagne and connections strengthened under dazzling chandeliers. Tonight, Lucas had one clear goal: solidifying Bennett Enterprises' dominance in the sustainable tech sector. The room shimmered with opulence, filled with New York's most powerful figures. Yet, amidst the glamour and prestige, Lucas's attention was unexpectedly drawn to a figure he hadn't seen in years. Clara Harrison, his ex-wife, walked in with an air of unshakable confidence that made the crowd part as she moved. Clara, who had once been content living in Lucas's shadow, now commanded the space effortlessly. Her transformation was undeniable. Every step she took, every understated smile she offered radiated a self-assurance that startled him. This wasn't the Clara who had left their marriage with nothing but her name and an iron resolve. As their eyes met across the room, Lucas felt a sensation foreign to his carefully curated demeanor: unease. For the first time in years, he wondered if he had underestimated her, not just during their marriage, but even now. Lucas Bennett, a celebrated tech entrepreneur with an insatiable drive for success, stood at the entrance of the Grand Manhattan Ballroom. The annual charity gala was his familiar playground, a venue where deals were sealed over glasses of champagne and connections strengthened under dazzling chandeliers. Tonight, Lucas had one clear goal: solidifying Bennett Enterprises' dominance in the sustainable tech sector. The room shimmered with opulence, filled with New York's most powerful figures. Yet, amidst the glamour and prestige, Lucas's attention was unexpectedly drawn to a figure he hadn't seen in years. Clara Harrison, his ex-wife, walked in with an air of unshakable confidence that made the crowd part as she moved. Clara, who had once been content living in Lucas's shadow, now commanded the space effortlessly. Her transformation was undeniable. Every step she took, every understated smile she offered radiated a self-assurance that startled him. This wasn't the Clara who had left their marriage with nothing but her name and an iron resolve. As their eyes met across the room, Lucas felt a sensation foreign to his carefully curated demeanor: unease. As the night progressed, Lucas found his unease evolving into something sharper, an unsettling realization that Clara's presence wasn't just unexpected, it was disruptive. She wasn't simply an ex-wife making an impression, she was a force redefining the rules of his carefully constructed world. Vanessa, perceptive and visibly irritated, noticed Lucas's attention lingering on Clara. "She's just performing," Vanessa said, her words sharp as glass. "Don't fall for it. She's clearly trying to upstage you, probably to impress that Ethan guy." Lucas didn't respond. Vanessa's attempt to dismiss Clara's transformation didn't ease his turmoil. If anything, it deepened it. Clara wasn't performing. She believed in what she was saying. Her confidence wasn't manufactured. It was genuine. And that authenticity made her presence impossible to ignore. Across the room, Clara stood at the center of a small group, her voice carrying with an ease Lucas hadn't seen before. She spoke passionately about sustainable energy, detailing why innovation wasn't just necessary for survival, but essential for progress. Vanessa tugged at Lucas's arm, her frustration growing. "Come on, we need to talk to the primary sponsor," she insisted. Lucas barely acknowledged her. His focus remained fixed on Clara. Her words echoed in his mind. Calculated risks lead to true growth. It was a sentiment Lucas had once embraced but had long since abandoned in favor of caution and control. Finally, Clara turned toward him, her gaze steady. "And you, Lucas?" she asked, her voice calm but deliberate. "Does Bennett Enterprises plan to take meaningful steps toward sustainability, or is it still just about profit margins?" The question hung in the air, drawing the attention of everyone in the group, including Ethan, whose piercing stare felt like a challenge. Lucas straightened, his mind racing for a response. "We're always exploring opportunities to innovate sustainably," he said, his voice steady but lacking the conviction he usually commanded. Clara smiled, not with mockery, but with an unmistakable air of knowing. "I hope so," she replied. "The world needs companies that don't just survive but make a real difference." Her words pierced deeper than Lucas cared to admit. They weren't just a critique of his company. They were a judgment of his values. It was as if Clara's words had torn down the carefully built walls he had constructed around his life and his identity. The group dispersed, but Lucas lingered, lost in thought, wondering if the man he had become was someone he could still respect. Vanessa returned to his side, her expression stormy. "She just called you outdated, and you let her get away with it?" Lucas glanced at her, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. "She's not wrong." Vanessa's eyes widened, disbelief etched across her face. "What's that supposed to mean?" But Lucas didn't answer. His mind was too consumed by Clara, her confidence, her vision, and the uncomfortable truths she had forced him to confront. The following morning, Lucas's world took another unexpected turn when a series of anonymous documents arrived in his personal email. The files detailed a meticulously crafted conspiracy between Vanessa and Oliver Hayes, a prominent industry rival. Together, they had orchestrated a plan to undermine Bennett Enterprises, manipulating stock prices, planting doubts among key investors, and preparing to dismantle the company for their gain. Lucas scanned the documents, each page igniting a growing fury. This wasn't just a betrayal of his trust. It was an attack on the foundation he had spent years building. Thousands of employees, groundbreaking projects, and his reputation were all at risk. As he sat in his office, Clara arrived unannounced. She placed a folder on his desk and took a seat across from him, her expression serious yet calm. "You need to see this," she said. Lucas opened the folder, finding additional evidence that confirmed Vanessa's involvement. Emails, meeting notes, and even financial transactions linked her directly to Hayes' scheme. "How long have you known about this?" Lucas asked, his voice low but laced with tension. Clara met his gaze steadily. "A few weeks, but I knew you wouldn't believe me if I told you. You needed to see it for yourself." Her words stung, but Lucas couldn't argue with the truth in them. For years, he had dismissed Clara's insights, assuming her judgment was clouded by personal emotions. Now, it was clear she had been right to wait. That evening, Lucas confronted Vanessa at her apartment. She answered the door with a confident smile that faltered the moment she saw the look on his face. "Why?" Lucas asked, his voice cold and steady. Vanessa hesitated but quickly recovered. "Lucas, you've been distracted. You're not the leader this company needs anymore. Hayes and I were only trying to secure its future." "By tearing it apart?" Lucas shook his shot back, his anger rising. "You didn't just betray me, you betrayed everyone who trusted you, from the employees to the investors." Vanessa's composure cracked, and her voice turned defensive. "This is Clara's fault. She's always been a problem, and now she's back to destroy everything we've built." Lucas's expression hardened, his tone sharper than before. "Clara isn't the problem, you are. And as of now, you're out of my life and my company." The next morning, Lucas called an emergency board meeting, this time with Clara by his side. As they entered the boardroom, the tension was palpable. Vanessa and Hayes were present, their expressions a mix of defiance and unease. "Before we begin," Lucas said, his voice clear and commanding, "I'd like to add an item to the agenda: betrayal and corporate espionage." Vanessa tried to maintain her composure, but her growing unease was evident. Lucas presented the evidence: emails, secret meetings, and detailed plans for the hostile takeover. The room filled with murmurs of disbelief and anger as the truth unfolded. Clara stood and addressed the board, her tone firm but measured. If their plan had succeeded, it wouldn't just have destroyed Bennett Enterprises. It would have jeopardized thousands of jobs and undermined the trust this company has worked so hard to build. Vanessa stood abruptly, her voice defensive. "I was doing what needed to be done. Lucas has been too distracted to lead effectively." Lucas met her gaze, his expression unwavering. "You weren't protecting the company. You were protecting your own ambitions." The board voted unanimously to terminate Vanessa and Hayes on the spot. As security escorted them out, Lucas felt the weight of their betrayal begin to lift. But this moment didn't bring the satisfaction he had expected. As the meeting adjourned, Lucas lingered in the boardroom, his thoughts heavy. Clara approached, her voice soft but steady. "You did the right thing." Lucas sighed, his gaze distant. "Maybe, but the company needs more than just damage control. It needs a leader who's willing to change." The hours following the board meeting were filled with reflection. For Lucas, the realization was clear. His company wasn't the only thing in need of transformation. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in his office, staring out at the city he once thought of as his playground. Now, it felt more like a maze, one he had been navigating without a purpose. That evening, Lucas made his way to Clara's office. She looked up from her desk as he entered, her expression calm but curious. "I wanted to thank you," Lucas began, his voice quieter than usual. "For what?" Clara asked, setting her pen down. "For helping me see what I've been blind to. Vanessa's betrayal, the company's stagnation, my own shortcomings." Clara studied him for a moment, then leaned back in her chair. "I didn't do it for you, Lucas. I did it for the people who depend on this company, the employees, the partners, the communities it serves." "I know," Lucas admitted, his gaze steady. He hesitated, then took a deep breath. "But there's something else I need to say, something I should have said a long time ago." Clara's brow furrowed slightly as she watched him. "I'm sorry, Clara," Lucas said, his voice laced with sincerity, "for the way I treated you during our marriage, for making you feel invisible, for not listening when you tried to tell me what you needed. Do you remember that night after the charity auction? You told me you felt like a ghost in your own life, and I've brushed it off like it was nothing. I've replayed that moment in my head so many times, and I hate myself for not hearing you." Clara remained silent, her expression unreadable, so Lucas pressed on. "I was so consumed with my own goals, my own version of success, that I didn't see what I was losing, what I'd already lost, until it was too late. You deserved better, and I failed you. For that, I'm deeply sorry." Clara's gaze softened, though her voice remained steady. "It wasn't easy, Lucas, leaving the life we built. But I had to. Not just for me, but for you too." She paused, her tone firm but not unkind. "I don't hold on to anger anymore. I let it go a long time ago. But forgiveness isn't about words, it's about actions." Lucas nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. "I understand. I don't expect anything from you, but I hope I can show you that I've changed, or at least that I'm trying to." Clara tilted her head slightly, her expression softening. "If you're serious about change, Lucas, the first thing you need to do is learn to trust people again." In the weeks that followed, Lucas began taking small but deliberate steps toward rebuilding himself and his company. He started by listening. For years, he had surrounded himself with people who only told him what he wanted to hear. Now, he sought out voices he had once dismissed, engaging directly with employees and teams. One day, he visited the Sustainable Energy Division, where a group of young engineers presented a pilot project for renewable energy storage. It was bold and untested, and in the past, Lucas would have dismissed it as too risky. But this time, he stayed, asking questions and encouraging the team to move forward with their vision. Clara noticed the change, though she kept her observations to herself. She saw Lucas stepping back from the micromanaging tendencies that had defined him, allowing others to lead while he provided guidance from the background. One evening, Clara invited Lucas to her office. On her desk lay a meticulously detailed proposal, a partnership between Bennett Enterprises and her organization to develop a comprehensive sustainable energy initiative. "This is what we've been working on," Clara said, sliding the document toward him. "It's ambitious, but I think it could be transformative." Lucas opened the folder, scanning the pages. As he read, a sense of clarity settled over him. The proposal wasn't just about business, it was a blueprint for a meaningful legacy. "I agree," Lucas said, looking up at Clara. "But this time, we're doing it together." Clara's smile was genuine, the tension that had once defined their interactions beginning to fade. "Together it is." 1 month later, Lucas and Clara stood side by side on the stage of a major industry event, ready to unveil their shared vision. The collaboration between Bennett Enterprises and Clara's organization had taken shape as a groundbreaking initiative in sustainable energy. In front of them, an audience of investors, reporters, and industry leaders waited expectantly. For the first time in years, Lucas felt no nerves. Instead, he felt pride. Not the fleeting kind born from profits or power plays, but the deeper satisfaction of creating something meaningful. "A year ago," Lucas began, his voice steady, "I measured success by numbers, profits, market share, growth percentages. But today, I understand that true success is about impact. It's about building something that outlasts us. Clara stepped forward, seamlessly continuing. This project is not just a partnership, it's a commitment. A commitment to a future where innovation serves not just shareholders, but communities, where progress doesn't come at the cost of sustainability. The audience erupted into applause as they detailed their initiative, an ambitious program to bring green technology and renewable energy to underserved areas. It wasn't just a business strategy, it was a vision for a better future. After the presentation, Lucas and Clara stepped out onto the balcony overlooking the city. The sunlight bathed the skyline in a golden hue, casting long shadows that danced across the pavement below. Lucas turned to Clara, a genuine smile breaking across his face. "We did it." Clara smiled back, her eyes glinting with hope. "We didn't just do it, Lucas. We started something bigger, something that actually matters." Lucas nodded, the weight of her words settling over him. "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful. For everything, even the mistakes, they brought us here." Clara leaned on the railing, her voice softer. "Sometimes, it's the breaking that lets us rebuild stronger." For a moment, neither of them spoke, letting the peaceful hum of the city fill the space between them. It wasn't the grand silence of power, but the quiet of purpose. As the day wound down, Lucas found himself thinking about the journey that had brought him to this moment. He had once been a man obsessed with control, blind to the cracks forming in his life. It took losing almost everything, his marriage, his confidence, his illusion of stability, for him to understand what truly mattered. Clara, too, had undergone a transformation. She had stepped out of his shadow not just to find herself, but to forge her own path. And in doing so, she had become a beacon of strength and authenticity, a partner Lucas now knew he didn't deserve, but was determined to honor. "It's funny," Lucas said, breaking the silence. "Sometimes you have to lose everything to see what truly matters. Not just in life, but in business too. This project, this partnership, it's the first time in years I felt like I'm building something real, something that actually matters." Clara nodded, her expression thoughtful. And sometimes, the chance to rebuild is the greatest gift of all. They didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but they both understood this. They had changed, and their change had created something stronger, something real.
Billionaire found his maid studying late at night, then discovered her secret and changed her life forever. The mansion was silent, cloaked in darkness except for a single beam of light spilling faintly from the kitchen. The old grandfather clock in the hallway had just struck 2, an hour when even the restless usually surrendered to sleep. William descended the stairs slowly, barefoot, robe draped over his shoulders. He wasn't used to the quiet. Once, years ago, it had been filled with laughter, piano music, the rustling of pages as his wife read by the fire. Now it was silence and routine. Tea at 9, solitude by 10, insomnia by midnight. He wasn't expecting anyone else to be awake. As he turned the corner into the kitchen, he stopped. There, hunched over the marble island, sat Anna. She wore a loose sweater over her house uniform, sleeves rolled up, a pencil tucked behind her ear. Around her were thick medical textbooks, a spiral notebook filled with handwritten notes, diagrams sketched in ink. She didn't notice him at first, too immersed in her world of anatomy and chemical equations. William cleared his throat. Anna jumped, snapping the book shut, startled. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, rising to her feet. "I didn't think anyone would be awake." He raised a hand. No, it's fine. I just came down for some water, but what are you doing?" She hesitated, then lowered her eyes. "I was just studying." "At 2 in the morning?" "I have an exam tomorrow," she said quietly. "A placement test for an online program." William frowned slightly. "I didn't know you were taking classes." "I do it after work," she said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Only at night. I can't afford school here yet, but if I pass the exam, I might qualify for remote courses. It's a small chance, but I have to try." There was a pause. He glanced at the textbook nearest to him. Advanced Human Biology. "You want to be a nurse?" he asked. Anna looked up, and for the first time he saw it, the fire behind her usually lowered gaze. "A doctor," she said. William blinked. "I want to be a doctor," she continued, voice firmer now. "I've wanted that since I was a child." He studied her for a moment. She wasn't even 30. Small, polite, efficient. She cleaned the house, folded the laundry, never spoke unless spoken to. And yet here she was, burning the candle on both ends, chasing a dream that most would have abandoned long ago. "Why?" he asked. She hesitated. "Because when I was 10, my father got sick. We didn't have money for proper treatment. He died at home. I remember sitting beside him feeling useless. I promised I'd never feel that helpless again." William didn't respond at first. He just looked at her, truly looked. She wasn't asking for pity. Her voice wasn't broken. Her eyes didn't beg. She simply stood there, quietly brave, surrounded by the tools of a dream no one had handed her, one she was building with scraps of time, worn books, and pure determination. "You're tired," he said softly. "Yes," she admitted. "But you're still studying." "Yes." He nodded once, as if processing a truth he hadn't been prepared to find in his own kitchen. "Well," he said after a moment, reaching for a glass of water. "Don't let me interrupt." Anna looked surprised. "Go on," he added, gesturing gently toward the notebook. "You have an exam to pass." Her lips parted slightly in disbelief. Then, slowly, she nodded, sat down, and opened her book again. As William turned to leave, he paused in the doorway, glancing back at her. This young woman with no time, no help, no guarantees, only grit. And in that moment, something shifted. He no longer saw the maid who washed his windows and ironed his shirts. He saw courage. He saw fight. He saw the seed of a future not yet written. And for the first time in a very long time, he felt something stir in his chest, something that had lain dormant since the day he buried his wife. Hope, admiration, maybe even the faint, unfamiliar ache of inspiration. In the silence of his own mansion, William Duval realized that the brightest light was coming not from chandeliers or wealth, but from a small kitchen lamp and the quiet, relentless flame of a dreamer named Anna. Anna's days began before the sun rose and ended long after the world had gone to sleep. At 5 a.m. she was already awake, preparing breakfast in the quiet kitchen, folding linens, organizing the pantry before anyone else stirred. By mid-morning, she was sweeping the long halls of the estate, polishing glass doors, scrubbing marble floors until they shone like mirrors. She moved with quiet efficiency, never lingering, never resting too long. At lunchtime, she served meals she didn't taste. In the afternoon, she tended the garden, wiped dust from bookshelves in rooms she was never invited to sit in. And when the household finally quieted for the night, Anna returned to her room, the smallest one near the laundry, with a creaky bed and a desk made of salvaged wood, and began her second life. Her textbooks were old, bought second-hand from online listings and shipped from the Florida. Her notes were scribbled in the margins of scrap paper, receipts, napkins she had saved from lunch. Her only light was a dim desk lamp that flickered when the air conditioner kicked in. But still, she studied. She practiced pronunciation of complex medical terms under her breath, afraid to wake the sleeping house. She watched hours of free lectures on YouTube, pausing and rewinding every few minutes to understand the terminology. Her internet connection often lagged, but she refused to complain. She couldn't afford the luxury of frustration. She would pause only to check her phone at midnight, a message from her younger sister, Mari, saying goodnight, a photo of their mothers sleeping, looking thinner each week, a drawing from her youngest brother, Ben, showing Anna as a superhero in a white coat. She kept those messages as screensavers, tiny reminders of why she was doing this. She sent home nearly everything she earned. For medicine, for tuition, for food. She left just enough for instant noodles, toothpaste, and bus fare, though she rarely left the property. She hadn't bought new clothes in years. Her shoes had holes in them. She cut her own hair to save money. None of it mattered. She had a purpose. Her dream of becoming a doctor wasn't about ambition or prestige. It was about people like her father, who had died on a bamboo cot, sweating through a fever they couldn't afford to treat. It was about mothers in the province, waiting too long to give birth because there were no clinics. It was about giving children like Ben a better answer than, "We don't have the money." People told her it was impossible, that no one like her, brown-skinned, broke, a housemaid in a foreign land, could ever wear a white coat. But Anna didn't argue. She simply worked. Even on the hardest days, when her hands ached from scrubbing or her eyes burned from sleep deprivation, she never let the fire inside her dim. She carried her dream like a small, sacred ember in her chest. And William noticed. He didn't say anything, not yet, but he saw the way she moved with discipline, the way she snuck glances at her books when she thought no one was watching. He noticed the way she touched everything with care, even the furniture, even the floor, as if the world deserved gentleness no matter how hard it was. Anna never asked for more, not time, not money, not recognition. She didn't believe in handouts. She believed in doing the work. And she did, quietly, relentlessly, unapologetically. One night, as she sat at her desk, cross-referencing symptoms for a mock diagnostic test, she looked up at the ceiling and whispered to herself, "I'll get there, even if it takes me forever. I'll get there." She didn't know if anyone heard, but someone had, and for the first time in his life, William felt that perhaps true strength wasn't loud or powerful or adorned in medals. Sometimes, true strength wore an apron by day, a pencil in her hair by night, and carried the weight of a future no one else believed in, except her. It began with a second glance. At first, William had only observed Anna from a distance, casually, with the kind of detached curiosity that people of his stature often had toward those who quietly served them. But something shifted after that night in the kitchen. After seeing her huddled over medical books, eyes blazing with tired resolve, he found himself noticing her more closely. More often, he saw how gently she trimmed the hydrangeas in the back garden, as if they were living things with stories to tell. How she wrapped a dish towel around the handle of the hot kettle so the cook wouldn't burn his hand. How she noticed when the butler looked pale and left him warm soup outside his door with no name attached. She didn't speak much, but in the silence, she communicated something few people in William's world ever did. Awareness, kindness, not as performance but as instinct. He started asking her questions in passing, small, non-intrusive things at first. How long have you been working here? 3 years, sir. Before that, private homes. Always live in. It's easier for saving. Her answers were short, respectful. She never lingered, never assumed. But she was honest, and it was that honesty, clear, stripped of performance, that struck him. One evening, as he sat on the terrace nursing a cup of black tea, he saw her returning from the market with 2 bags in hand. Instead of handing them off, she stopped by the gardener, who was on his knees tending to a rosebush, and handed him a small box of balm for his knees. "You said they ached last week," she said softly, before disappearing into the kitchen. William didn't speak. But something stirred inside him. The next evening, as he passed the hallway near the study, he found her sitting by the open door of the service corridor, reading again. She looked up, startled, then began to stand. "No need," he said. "Mind if I join you?" Her eyes widened slightly. "Here?" "I like the quiet," he said, lowering himself into the opposite chair. She blinked, nodded, then closed her book. "No, don't stop on my account," he said. She hesitated, then opened it again. A few minutes passed in silence. Then softly he asked, "Do you miss the Florida?" She paused. "Every day." "Why don't you go back?" She didn't look up. "Because everything I need to become is still here." That night, they didn't say much more, but something passed between them, a thread. It became a pattern. A few nights later, he brought 2 cups of coffee to the same hallway. "This one's sweet," he said. "I wasn't sure how you take it." She smiled. "Sweet is good, thank you." They sat in silence, sipping slowly. Another evening, he asked her about her family. She told him about her mother, still recovering from a stroke, and her 2 siblings, both in school. How she sent them money every week. How she once wanted to be a teacher before switching dreams after her father's death. "Lynn died from a lung infection," she said quietly. "There was no doctor in our village. The nearest clinic was 2 hours away. By the time we got there, it was too late." William didn't speak. His hands curled slightly around the warm mug. "My wife," he said after a pause, "used to teach children in the city, every Saturday morning, rain or shine." Anna looked at him. "She died of cancer 5 years ago," he added. "Fast, aggressive. 1 month she was laughing at my bad piano playing. The next, gone." Anna lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry," he shook his head. "I've never told anyone that in this house." They sat together in that quiet for a long time. No pretense, no roles. Just 2 people who knew loss, understood endurance, and recognized it in each other. After that, their evening conversations became a quiet ritual. Some nights they talked about science, some nights about memories. Others, they simply sat, sipping coffee and sharing the kind of silence that wasn't empty, but filled with mutual understanding. William found himself looking forward to those hours. They weren't loud or dramatic, but in the gentle rhythm of Anna's presence, something within him began to thaw. He started to smile more, laugh at things he hadn't noticed before. One day, he caught himself humming a tune he hadn't remembered in years, and one night, as Anna handed him a mug of tea and their fingers brushed, just for a second, he felt a jolt, not of attraction necessarily, but of life, something he hadn't felt in a long, long time. The kind of warmth that doesn't blaze like fire, but glows, steady and quiet. And for the first time since burying his wife, William Duval realized his heart was still capable of beating for something more than memory. It had begun to feel again, because someone, without ever trying to, had reminded it how. It started with a phone call. William sat in his home office one morning, sunlight pouring over old mahogany furniture and stacks of business reports he no longer cared to read. He picked up the phone and dialed a private number, one known only to a few close colleagues. "Dr. Patel," he said when the voice on the other end answered, "I need a favor." A week later, Anna was summoned, not to the kitchen, not to the garden, but to the library, where William rarely entertained staff. She walked in, nervously wiping her hands on the hem of her blouse. "Sir?" He didn't look up from the folder on the desk. "There's a hospital I've worked with for over a decade. They run a community outreach program on Saturdays. I've arranged for you to assist as a volunteer." Her eyes widened. Volunteer? In a real hospital? He nodded. You'll shadow nurses, help with non-critical tasks, observe, learn. It's only a few hours each week. She opened her mouth to respond, but couldn't find words. Think of it as practice for the future, he added, finally looking up. Her throat tightened. Thank you, she whispered. I'll work hard, I promise. He gave a small smile. I know you will. That Saturday, Anna arrived at the bustling city hospital in her simplest clothes, hair tied back neatly, eyes filled with nervous energy. She was introduced to a nurse named Claudia, who gave her a quick rundown of protocols and assigned her to the outpatient clinic. Anna didn't hesitate. She took blood pressure readings, helped fill out forms for elderly patients who struggled with English, calmed crying children in the waiting room, and disinfected beds between appointments. She moved with care but also with purpose, watching, absorbing, assisting where she could. By the end of the first day, Claudia approached her with a raised eyebrow. You said this is your first time in a hospital? Anna nodded, unsure if she'd done something wrong. You have better bedside instincts than some of our interns. Anna blinked. I just try to help like I'd want someone to help my family. Claudia stared at her for a second longer, then nodded. Come back next week, same time. Every Saturday after that, Anna returned. Early, eager, always ready to learn. She asked questions when appropriate, took notes in her small, well-worn notebook, and stayed longer than required. The staff began to recognize her. A few doctors even asked her opinion during rounds, not to test her, but because she paid attention. Meanwhile, William asked nothing. He didn't hover, didn't ask for updates, but each Saturday evening when she returned, he'd casually leave a cup of warm tea outside her door. No words, no notes, just quiet support. Then, one Thursday afternoon, William invited her once again to the library. This time there was a folder waiting on the desk. Anna approached slowly. Is something wrong? He gestured for her to sit. No, quite the opposite. She took the seat, confused. William slid the folder across the desk. Inside was an acceptance letter from a prestigious healthcare foundation tied to his company. It was addressed to her, a full scholarship to a 2-year pre-medical certificate program with a guaranteed pathway into a partner university's medical school if she passed. Her hands shook as she read. I don't understand, she whispered. I didn't apply for this. You didn't need to, he said. I did. She looked up, stunned. Why would you do that for me? William met her gaze, eyes steady. Because I see who you are becoming. Tears welled up in her eyes. You work harder than anyone I know. You've taught yourself more than some students with every advantage in the world. And you care, deeply, genuinely. That can't be taught, but it deserves to be nurtured. She covered her mouth with her hand, trying to process it all. You don't owe me anything, he continued. This isn't charity, this is belief. You've earned every line of that letter. I just helped the world see it. I'm just, she shook her head, a housemaid. No, he said softly. You're a future doctor. You just need the world to catch up. That night, Anna didn't study. She sat in her room, staring at the acceptance letter, the seal embossed in gold at the top, her name printed in bold. All her life she had fought for scraps, for minutes to learn, for books to borrow, for the smallest sliver of a dream. Now, a door had opened, not by miracle, but by the quiet faith of someone who had seen her, not her position, not her poverty, but her potential. And that, more than any acceptance letter, was the gift she had never dared to ask for. Hope. Real, tangible hope, the kind that could build a future. Anna held the letter in her hands for days, folding and unfolding it, tracing her name with her fingertip, rereading each line until she could recite it in her sleep. A full scholarship, a real classroom, professors, labs, textbooks she wouldn't have to borrow, a future. But behind that golden seal was a cost she couldn't ignore. She sat at her desk late one night, calculator in hand, scribbling numbers on the back of an envelope. Tuition was covered, but rent back home wasn't. Nor were her mother's medications, nor the school fees for Mari and Ben. Every dollar she sent home from her maid's salary was already accounted for. If she left this job to study full-time, that lifeline would disappear. She placed her head in her hands. Could she really walk away? From the steady income, however small? From the people she had sworn to care for? Could she risk everything they depended on, just to chase something that still felt like a dream? The next morning, Anna asked to speak with William. He invited her into the conservatory, a quiet, sunlit space lined with potted orchids and ferns. She stood stiffly across from him, the acceptance letter clutched tightly in her hands. I don't think I can go, she said, her voice low. Not now. William looked up from the tea he was pouring. Why? I send money home every week. My mother's health depends on her medication. My siblings, they're still in school. If I stop working, they'll have nothing. I can't be selfish. He set the teapot down. Anna, what you call selfish, I call brave. She shook her head. They need me more than the world needs another doctor. He stood slowly, walked over to her, and gently placed a hand on the letter between her fingers. You've spent your entire life giving, and I admire that. But if you give up your dream to survive, you'll keep surviving and never truly live. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm not asking you to abandon them, he continued, but maybe it's time someone else helped carry the weight. Maybe it's time you became the person you were meant to be. She stared at him, trembling. No one's ever said that to me before, she whispered. I mean it. Silence settled between them like falling dust. Then, slowly, she lowered herself into the chair across from him. Her fingers loosened on the letter, her shoulders dropped. I'm scared, she said. I know, he replied gently. That's how you know it's worth it. Anna looked out the glass doors at the morning sun pouring across the garden. She thought of her father, coughing in the dark, her mother waiting for medicine, her sister drawing pictures of Anna in a white coat, her brother with wide eyes full of questions she never had time to answer, and she thought of herself, not who she had been, but who she might become. Finally, she nodded. I'll do it. William exhaled, a small smile touching his lips. Then the world just got luckier. She laughed through the tears, the kind of laugh that came from deep within, half joy, half disbelief. I don't know how to thank you, she said. You don't have to, he said. Just become who you already are. That night, Anna began to pack, not with fear, but with something else, courage. The quiet thrill of finally stepping into a life that had always felt just out of reach. She wasn't leaving her family behind. She was walking forward, for them and for herself. The first day at the Medical Foundation program felt like entering another world. Anna stood outside the campus building, her backpack slung over one shoulder, clutching a folder of documents. Around her, students stepped out of luxury cars, wore designer coats, carried tablets and noise-canceling headphones. Their conversations drifted through the crisp morning air, talk of vacations, private tutors, legacy admissions. She shrank slightly into her sweater, feeling the frayed edge of her collar like a spotlight. She walked quickly through the glass doors, head down, clutching her scholarship ID like a shield. In her first anatomy lab, she didn't speak. She took notes, listened intently, nodded when addressed. She didn't laugh with the others when the professor made a joke. She was too focused, too unsure if she even belonged. The other students barely noticed her. A few smiled politely, most didn't ask her name. But Anna paid attention. She watched, she studied, she memorized every term, reviewed every night, practiced alone with flashcards and online simulations. She was always the first to arrive, the last to leave, quiet, invisible, but present, relentless. One afternoon during a group case study, the instructor posed a challenging scenario about a rare immune disorder. The class hesitated, unsure. Anna raised her hand, soft but steady. The symptoms align with a variant of Job syndrome, she said. We covered it last week in the immunology reading. The room fell silent. The instructor blinked. That's correct. From that day on, the whispers began to shift. They started asking her questions, not out of condescension, but curiosity. Who was she? Where had she learned to think like that? Anna never gave long answers. She simply kept showing up over and over again, with precision, humility, and fire. Every month she wrote to William, not emails, letters, handwritten on lined paper, folded neatly into envelopes. She told him about her classes, her tests, her small victories. She thanked him in every one, never once forgetting who had opened the door, but never asking for anything more. He never replied, but he read each one, and after reading, he pinned them on a corkboard in his study. Each letter like a quiet testament to something he hadn't known he needed, a reminder that his world, once cold and calculated, had somehow helped bring something good to life. One evening, his assistant stepped into the study, saw the letters, and asked, "Are these from your niece?" William smiled faintly. "Something like that." Anna continued to thrive. She received top scores on her exams, praise from professors, and invitations to assist in research projects. She joined a mentorship program for immigrant students, offering tutoring sessions to those just beginning the journey she had once feared. And slowly, something changed. Not in her surroundings, but in her. She began to walk taller. She started raising her hand more. She met her professor's eyes. She stopped apologizing when she spoke. It wasn't arrogance. It was arrival. She had once whispered her dream in the dark. Now she stood in brightly lit lecture halls and spoke of medicine, care, and ethics with clarity and strength. One afternoon, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror of the campus library. Hair pulled back neatly, a white coat draped over her arm, textbooks hugged to her chest. She didn't look like a maid anymore. She looked like a future doctor. But more than that, she looked like someone who knew she belonged. And though William never said a word about the letters on his wall, he read them each night, carefully, like scripture. And in his quiet home, once so full of loss, there was now a soft, steady presence, the knowledge that somewhere Anna was becoming exactly who she was meant to be, not because of him, but because someone had finally believed she could. The car pulled into the long gravel driveway, crunching softly beneath the tires. The estate hadn't changed much. The ivy still curled around the white columns, the windows still gleamed in the afternoon sun, and the garden bloomed with the same quiet elegance Anna remembered. But something inside her had shifted completely. She stepped out, straightened her blazer, and took a deep breath. 4 years. 4 years since she had walked this path with a mop in one hand and a lunch bag in the other. 4 years since she'd quietly scrubbed floors, cooked meals, folded sheets, and studied at night, holding on to a fragile dream. Now she returned not as a maid, but as a graduate of medical school, a doctor in training, a woman shaped by grit, pain, and relentless faith. She rang the bell. The door opened slowly, and there he was. William, a little older now, the lines on his face a bit deeper, his hair grayer, but his eyes the same, warm, watchful. For a brief moment, neither spoke. Then he smiled. "Anna," he said, his voice softer than she remembered. She smiled back. "Hello, Mr. Duval." "No more, sir?" She shook her head, laughing gently. "Not today." He stepped aside. "Come in." She entered the house she had once cleaned from top to bottom, but now she saw it differently. Not as a place she served, but one that had silently witnessed her transformation. They walked through the hallway, down to the conservatory, where the sunlight still poured across the tiled floor. He poured tea without asking, just like he used to, and handed her a cup. They sat. For a while, they didn't speak. The silence was familiar now. Comfortable. Shared. Finally, William said, "I kept all your letters." Anna looked up. "They're still on the wall," he added, his gaze distant. "When the house feels too quiet, I read them again." Her throat tightened. "I never knew if you read them." He chuckled. "Every single one. Twice." She smiled, eyes soft. "Thank you for everything. I wouldn't have made it without your belief." "You made it," he said, "because you refused not to." They fell into stories after that, of school, of long nights studying, of her first patient, of the hospital where she would start her residency. William listened, hands wrapped around his cup, occasionally nodding, occasionally laughing. Then he asked, gently, "Do you ever regret leaving?" She looked at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, she shook her head. "No," she said, "because what I found on the way back was me." He nodded once, deeply, as if those words filled something in him he hadn't known was empty. The sun dipped lower, painting the room in amber. They sat in the glow, not as employer and employee, not as billionaire and maid, but as something else. Something unspoken, but deeply real. And in the quiet between them something passed. Not love declared, not promises made, but a recognition of all they had walked through, of all they had become, and the possibility of what might still be. The auditorium was packed, the lights warm and the applause deafening. Anna stood at the podium in her graduation gown, hands trembling slightly around the edges of the speech she had written and rewritten 100 times. Her white coat now bore her name stitched in clean black letters, Dr. Anna Mee Santos, and her heart beat not with fear, but with something stronger, quiet certainty. She took a breath and looked out at the sea of faces, fellow graduates, proud families, professors and sponsors, and somewhere near the back, in the shadows, sat William. He didn't wave, he didn't stand, but he was there, as he always had been. Anna leaned forward into the microphone. "I wasn't born into a life of opportunity," she began. "I was born into a small home where dreams were often too expensive to afford." A hush fell over the crowd. "I grew up watching illness take away the people I loved, not because there weren't cures, but because we couldn't reach them. And for a long time I believed my job was simply to survive." She paused, eyes searching for courage in the silence. "But then, one day, someone saw me. Not for what I did, not for where I came from, but for what I could become." She smiled, soft and steady. "There was a man who saw me, not as a maid, but as a story waiting to be told. And he gave me the one thing that can't be bought, belief." A murmur rippled through the audience, but Anna didn't flinch. "That belief changed everything, and now I stand here not just as a doctor, but as proof that kindness can be the seed of something extraordinary." The standing ovation lasted minutes, but Anna didn't hear it. Her eyes had already found him. William, still seated, not clapping but smiling, a slow, proud smile that reached his eyes. Months later, Anna opened her first community clinic in a modest building in Queens. It wasn't glamorous, just 5 rooms, a small waiting area, and a mural painted by local kids on the side wall. But it was full of patients, of volunteers, of hope. She offered checkups to undocumented families, prenatal care to mothers who couldn't afford hospitals, vaccines for children who'd fallen through the cracks. Her staff was small, her budget tighter than ever, but her doors were always open. She named it Project Hiwaga, Tagalog for wonder, a tribute to the mystery of how life, despite everything, could still bloom. No donor names were printed on the plaque, but Anna knew. William funded the equipment, covered the rent, sent monthly donations through anonymous channels. When she thanked him, through letters, voicemails, messages he never answered, he simply continued. Quietly, one autumn afternoon, Anna invited him to visit. He arrived at closing hour, dressed in a simple coat, looking slightly thinner, a little slower, but his eyes still carried that steady gaze she'd come to trust. They sat on a bench outside the clinic, watching a group of children play with sidewalk chalk, drawing suns and stick figures and dreams. Neither spoke for a while. Then Anna said, "They think the building is magic." William raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" She smiled. "In a way, it was built on something stronger than concrete." He looked at her for a long moment, then reached for her hand. For just a moment, he held it. No words, no movement, just stillness. Then he let go. But in his eyes was everything she needed to know. That he had never stopped believing in her. That he had never wanted anything in return. That maybe, just maybe, love didn't always need to be spoken aloud to be real. She leaned her head lightly against his shoulder. The children laughed louder. The mural caught the sunset. And 2 people, once strangers in a kitchen lit by a single bulb, sat quietly, witnessing the life they'd built together, in different ways, for the same reason. Some stories don't end in love. Some begin with it, and simply keep growing. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful journey, one that began in silence, under the dim glow of a kitchen light, and unfolded into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. Anna and William's story isn't just about success or sacrifice. It's about seeing someone, truly seeing them, not for where they are, but for where they're capable of going. It's about the kind of love that doesn't always need to be named, but is felt deeply in the quiet moments of belief, support, and unwavering care. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Soul-Stirring Stories, where every week we bring you more true-to-life tales of hope, resilience, compassion, and the unexpected beauty of human connection. Your next favorite story is just one click away. Until next time, keep believing in others and in yourself.
Young Millionaire fell in love at first sight with the bridesmaid who was late for the wedding, not knowing she was. The grand estate in Napa Valley was bathed in golden light, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows over the sprawling vineyard. Inside the main hall, guests whispered and shifted in their seats, the soft rustle of silk and murmurs of impatience filling the air. Logan Blake stood near the altar, his sharp black tuxedo fitting him perfectly, but his expression was anything but composed. "Where is she?" Logan muttered under his breath, glancing at his watch for what felt like the 100th time. His brow furrowed, and he leaned closer to the bride, who was already in position, her lace gown glistening in the sunlight, pouring through the arched windows. "Everyone's waiting," Logan said, his voice low but laced with urgency. The bride, a vision of patience and poise, leaned toward him with a whispered explanation. "Her car broke down on the way," she called. "She's almost here. Just stall a little longer." Logan sighed, running a hand through his neatly styled hair. "Stall? This isn't a board meeting, it's a wedding. People expect the ceremony to start on time." "She'll make it," the bride said with a confident smile, though her own nerves showed in the way she clenched her bouquet. Before Logan could respond, a loud creak echoed through the hall. The massive double doors at the back of the room slowly opened, revealing a disheveled but breathtaking woman standing in the doorway. All heads turned as the woman stepped inside, her cheeks flushed from exertion, her breathing labored. Sophia Bennett, the missing bridesmaid, had finally arrived. Her long dress was slightly wrinkled, the hem trailing behind her, damp with evidence of her rushed journey. One of her shoes, a glittering silver heel, was visibly scuffed, and the other looked mismatched. Sorry, she whispered as she hurried down the aisle, clutching her bouquet with one hand and holding the train of her dress with the other. Her dark hair, half-pinned in an elegant style, had begun to unravel, loose strands framing her face. Despite her frazzled appearance, there was an undeniable grace about her, a quiet confidence that made the room seem to hush. Logan's gaze locked on her, his irritation evaporating in an instant. She reached the altar, mouthing another apology to the bride, who gave her an understanding nod. Logan, however, couldn't take his eyes off her. "Glad you could join us," he murmured, his tone hovering between sarcasm and amusement. Sophia glanced at him, her hazel eyes flashing with a mix of embarrassment and determination. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," she replied, her voice low but steady. As she took her place with the other bridesmaids, Logan found himself unable to focus on anything else. The ceremony began, the officiant's voice resonating through the hall, but Logan's thoughts were elsewhere. From the corner of his eye, Logan stole glances at Sophia. She stood tall and composed now, as if the chaos of her arrival had never happened. Her fingers gripped the bouquet tightly, but her expression softened as she watched the bride and groom exchange vows. Who is she? Logan wondered. Her presence was magnetic, pulling his attention away from everything else. Her mismatched shoes, the slightly smudged eyeliner that somehow only added to her charm, and the quiet dignity with which she carried herself, it all intrigued him. The vows were spoken, the rings exchanged, and applause erupted as the bride and groom kissed. Yet for Logan, the entire ceremony passed in a blur. His thoughts remained tethered to the enigmatic bridesmaid who had stormed into the hall like a whirlwind and captured his attention without even trying. As the guests began filing out for the reception, Logan lingered near the altar, his gaze following Sophia as she walked toward the exit with the other bridesmaids. "Logan, you coming?" the groom called, clapping a hand on his shoulder. Logan snapped out of his thoughts, plastering on a polite smile. "Yeah, I'll be right there." But as the groom walked off, Logan remained rooted in place, watching Sophia disappear through the doors. For the first time in years, Logan felt a sense of urgency that had nothing to do with business. He had to know more about her, to understand why she had managed to make such an impression on him in the span of a single, chaotic entrance. As the celebratory music drifted through the estate, Logan made his way to the reception, determined to find Sophia and uncover the mystery behind the bridesmaid who had turned his world upside down in mere moments. The golden glow of string lights cast a warm hue over the vineyard reception, where the celebration was in full swing. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the hum of conversation filled the air as guests mingled, danced, and toasted the newlyweds. Logan Blake stood by the bar, his glass of champagne untouched. His sharp eyes scanned the crowd, searching for the one person he couldn't stop thinking about since the ceremony. It didn't take long to spot her. Sophia stood near the edge of the dance floor, speaking with one of the other bridesmaids. Her laughter carried over the music, soft but infectious. Logan set his glass down and strode toward her, his signature confidence propelling him forward. As he approached, Sophia glanced up, her hazel eyes meeting his. "You certainly know how to make an entrance," Logan said, his voice teasing but warm. Sophia's lips curved into a nervous smile. "Not my best moment," she admitted, "but at least I made it in time." "Barely," Logan quipped, his grin disarming. "But if you hadn't, I'm sure the bride would found a way to drag you down the aisle herself." Sophia laughed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "She might have tried. I wouldn't blame her, though. It's her big day." Logan tilted his head, studying her. "So how does someone as punctual as you end up late to a wedding?" Sophia hesitated for a beat, her smile faltering before she quickly recovered. "Let's just say it involved a flat tire, bad timing, and a lot of running in heels." Logan chuckled. "Sounds like a story worth hearing. Maybe over a dance?" Sophia glanced toward the dance floor, where couples swayed to a soft jazz melody. "I don't know," she began, but Logan extended his hand, his expression playful yet insistent. "Come on," he said. "You owe me for making us wait at the altar." Sophia rolled her eyes but placed her hand in his. "Fine, but don't expect me to be any good at this. I'm more of a spectator than a dancer." "We'll take it slow," Logan promised, leading her onto the floor. As they began to move, Sophia's initial awkwardness melted away. Logan's steady hand guided her effortlessly, his charm putting her at ease. "Not bad," he said, a smirk tugging at his lips. "For a self-proclaimed spectator." Sophia laughed softly. "You're not so bad yourself. I'm guessing you've done this before." "Once or twice," Logan admitted. "But I don't think I've ever had such a captivating partner." Sophia looked away, her cheeks tinged with color. "You're good at this," she said. "At dancing?" "No," she replied, meeting his gaze. "At making people feel comfortable, even when they're completely out of their element." Logan's smirk softened into a genuine smile. "It helps when the company is worth it." Their conversation flowed as easily as their movements, their banter laced with warmth and curiosity. Logan found himself drawn to her honesty and quick wit, while Sophia couldn't help but be intrigued by his easygoing demeanor. "So, what do you do, Sophia?" Logan asked as the song shifted into a slower melody. Sophia's smile faltered briefly. "I work at an art gallery," she said, choosing her words carefully. "Mostly behind the scenes." "That sounds fascinating," Logan said. "Which one?" "Maybe I've been there." "It's small," Sophia replied quickly. "Not the kind of place that gets a lot of foot traffic." Logan raised an eyebrow at her vague answer but decided not to press her. "I'd still love to see it sometime," he said. Sophia gave him a polite smile. "Maybe." As the dance ended, Logan escorted her off the floor, reluctant to let the conversation end. But as they neared the edge of the crowd, a photographer appeared, aiming their camera toward the dance floor. Sophia tensed visibly, turning her head away from the lens. "Everything okay?" Logan asked, noticing the shift in her demeanor. "I'm fine," Sophia said quickly. "I just don't like having my picture taken." Logan nodded, though her reaction puzzled him. "Fair enough. No photos then." Not long after, Sophia glanced at her watch and sighed. "I should go," she said, her tone reluctant. "Already?" Logan asked, disappointment flickering across his face. "It's getting late," Sophia replied, "and I have an early morning tomorrow." "Let me walk you out," Logan offered. Sophia hesitated but nodded. "All right." As they walked toward the parking area, Logan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Sophia than she was letting on. Her easy laugh, her sharp mind, and even her reluctance to share personal details all painted a picture of someone who carried secrets she wasn't ready to reveal. When they reached her car, a modest sedan with a slightly dented bumper, Sophia turned to face him. "Thanks for the dance, Logan," she said, her voice warm. "Thanks for letting me drag you onto the floor," Logan replied, his grin returning. "But I have a feeling I'll be seeing you again." Sophia's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "We'll see," she said, slipping into her car. Logan watched as she drove off, her taillights fading into the distance. His chest tightened with a mix of frustration and intrigue. He didn't know much about Sophia Bennett, but one thing was clear, he wasn't ready to let this mystery go. The morning after the wedding, Logan Blake found himself distracted. Sitting in his sleek corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown, he tried to focus on the endless emails demanding his attention. But his mind kept drifting back to Sophia Bennett, the mysterious bridesmaid who had left as quickly as she had arrived. His curiosity got the better of him. By mid-morning, he picked up his phone and called the bride. "Logan," her voice chirped on the other end, "what can I do for you?" "I have a question," Logan said, trying to sound casual. "Your bridesmaid, Sophia. What's her story?" The bride hesitated, her tone turning cautious. "Sophia's a private person, Logan. She doesn't talk much about her life, especially her family. I'll just say she's been through a lot and likes to keep her distance." "Distance, huh?" Logan mused. "Well, she's not making it easy for someone to get to know her." "Maybe that's the point," the bride said with a light laugh. "But if anyone can break through, it's you. Just be gentle. She's not like the women you're used to." Logan couldn't let it go. Using the connections that came with his influence, he soon discovered Sophia's workplace, a small but charming art gallery tucked away in a quieter part of the city. That afternoon, Logan walked through its doors, the bell above tinkling softly. The gallery was bright and airy, its walls lined with abstract paintings, modern sculptures, and photographs that seemed to capture fleeting moments. In the center of the room, sorting through a stack of frames, was Sophia. Her hair was pulled back into a loose ponytail, and she wore a simple blouse and jeans, a sharp contrast to the elegant dress she'd worn at the wedding. Yet Logan found her just as captivating. Sophia looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to mild annoyance. "Logan," she said, standing. "What are you doing here?" "You disappeared before I could ask for a second dance," Logan replied smoothly, his grin playful. Sophia crossed her arms, arching an eyebrow. "And you tracked me down for that? Persistent, aren't you?" "You left me no choice," Logan said, his tone light. "Besides, I was curious. You're full of surprises, Sophia Bennett." Sophia sighed but didn't seem entirely upset by his presence. "So now you've satisfied your curiosity. You can leave." Logan's grin widened. "Not quite. How about coffee? Unless you're planning to run away again." Sophia hesitated, glancing at the clock. She was about to decline when Logan added, "Just one coffee. You can even pick the place." Her lips twitched in what might have been the hint of a smile. "Fine, one coffee." They ended up at a cozy cafe a few blocks away. Logan held the door open for Sophia, who ordered tea while he opted for black coffee. They found a table by the window, the afternoon sunlight streaming in. So Logan began, leaning back in his chair, "Tell me about your art. Working at the gallery must be inspiring." Sophia nodded, her hands wrapped around her mug. "I love it. I've always been drawn to art, how it can say things words can't. I used to paint a lot when I was younger." "Why'd you stop?" Logan asked, his genuine interest catching her off guard. Sophia hesitated, her gaze dropping to her tea. "Life got complicated," she said simply. "Sometimes you have to put dreams on hold." Logan sensed she didn't want to elaborate, so he shifted the conversation. "Do you ever think about picking it up again? Painting, I mean." "Maybe," Sophia said softly, a wistful look in her eyes. "But it's hard to find the time." "Sometimes you have to make time for the things that matter," Logan said, his voice low but steady. Sophia looked at him, and for a moment her guarded expression softened. "That's easy for you to say," she replied, though there was no malice in her tone. Logan smiled. "Not as easy as you think." As they talked, Sophia found herself laughing at Logan's stories, his mishaps as a young entrepreneur, the time he accidentally crashed a golf cart at a charity event, and his struggle to keep a houseplant alive despite his best efforts. "You're not what I expected," Sophia admitted, surprising herself with the confession. "What did you expect?" Logan asked, leaning forward. "Someone different," she said vaguely, her smile fading as her phone buzzed on the table. Sophia glanced at the screen, her face paling slightly as she read the message. Logan noticed the change immediately. "Everything okay?" he asked. Sophia quickly put the phone away, forcing a tight smile. "It's nothing, just work." But Logan wasn't convinced. Sophia stood, grabbing her purse. "I should get back. Thanks for the coffee." Logan stood as well, watching her closely. "You're not running away again, are you?" he teased lightly, though his concern was evident. Sophia's smile was faint, almost apologetic. "Some mysteries are better left unsolved, Logan," she said before turning and walking out of the cafe. Logan sat back down, staring out the window as Sophia disappeared down the street. Her words lingered in his mind, but they only strengthened his resolve. He didn't know what she was hiding, but one thing was clear: he wasn't ready to give up on Sophia Bennett. Not yet. The following week, Logan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Sophia than she let on. Her evasiveness, the cryptic phone message, and her reluctance to talk about herself all pointed to a deeper story. The answers came unexpectedly during a lunch meeting with an old acquaintance, Mark Caldwell, a venture capitalist known for his encyclopedic knowledge of high society. "Logan, you've been distracted all lunch," Mark said with a grin. "What's on your mind? A new deal? Or is it a girl?" Logan smirked. "Maybe both. What do you know about Sophia Bennett?" Mark's expression shifted, his brow furrowing. "Bennett? Are we talking about Henry Bennett's daughter?" Logan froze. "What do you mean?" Mark leaned in, lowering his voice. "Henry Bennett was one of the biggest names in finance a decade ago. Then the scandal hit: fraud, insider trading, the works. His empire crumbled overnight. His daughter, Sophia, vanished from the public eye. Haven't heard her name in years." Logan processed this information, a mix of surprise and concern flooding his thoughts. "And she's been off the radar since then?" "As far as I know," Mark said. "If she's resurfaced, it's news to me. What's your connection to her?" Logan didn't answer, his thoughts racing. Later that evening, Logan stood outside the gallery, the sun setting behind him as he waited for Sophia. When she stepped out, locking the door behind her, she started in surprise at the sight of him. "Logan," she said cautiously, "what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but firm. Sophia's eyes flickered with apprehension, but she nodded. "All right, let's walk." They strolled down the quiet street, the city's evening bustle humming in the background. Logan didn't waste time. "I know who you are, Sophia," he began, watching her reaction closely. She stiffened, her steps faltering for a moment before she continued walking. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, her voice strained. "Henry Bennett," Logan said gently. "Your father." Sophia stopped abruptly, turning to face him. Her expression was a mix of fear and defiance. "Why didn't you tell me?" Logan asked, his tone less accusatory and more searching. "Were you ever going to?" "Because it doesn't matter," Sophia replied, her voice shaking. "I'm not that person anymore." They found a bench near a small park and sat in tense silence before Sophia finally spoke. "Everything changed when my father's world fell apart," she said quietly. "I was just out of college, trying to figure out who I was. Then the scandal broke, headlines, paparazzi, accusations everywhere. My father dragged us all down with him." Logan listened intently, his gaze fixed on her. "My mother left, my friends disappeared, and suddenly I was the daughter of a criminal. People only saw the name Bennett, not me," Sophia continued, her voice thick with emotion. "I couldn't escape it, so I left. I changed everything, my city, my job, my life. I wanted to rebuild, to be someone more than just his shadow." "Why the gallery?" Logan asked softly. "Because it's quiet," Sophia said. "Because no one asks questions and I can just exist without judgment." Logan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I get why you'd want to leave all that behind," he said. "But why not tell me? I wouldn't have judged you." Sophia looked at him, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Because I didn't want you to see me differently. The moment people know, it changes everything. They either pity me or use me. I didn't want that with you." Her vulnerability struck Logan deeply. He reached out, taking her hand. "Sophia, I don't care about your name or your past. I care about you, the person sitting right here." Sophia's lip quivered, and for a moment, it seemed like the walls she had built around herself were beginning to crumble. Before either could say more, a sudden flash startled them. Logan turned to see a man with a camera across the street, snapping photos furiously. "Who's that?" Sophia asked, her voice rising in panic. "Journalist," Logan said grimly, standing and shielding her from the lens. "Stay here." He crossed the street quickly, but the photographer darted into an alley, disappearing before Logan could reach him. When Logan returned, Sophia was visibly shaken. "He knows," she whispered. "It's all going to come out now." "Let me handle this," Logan said firmly. "I won't let them hurt you." Sophia shook her head, stepping back. "You don't understand. They'll dig up everything, my father, my family, my life. And now, you're part of it." "So what?" Logan countered. "Let them talk. It doesn't change how I feel about you." But Sophia was already retreating, her face pale. "I can't do this, Logan," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't drag you into my mess." She turned and walked away, leaving Logan standing alone in the fading light, the weight of her words pressing heavily on his heart. The morning started with chaos. Logan arrived at his office only to find a stack of newspapers and a barrage of emails from his PR team. The headlines splashed across every screen read: Billionaire's love affair with fallen heiress, Logan Blake and Sophia Bennett's secret past exposed. Logan scanned the article, his jaw tightening with each word. The piece painted Sophia as a manipulative social climber, desperate to use Logan's success to claw her way back into high society. There were photos from the park, accompanied by speculative commentary about their relationship. By mid-morning, the scandal had reached his boardroom. His business partners gathered for an emergency meeting, their concern evident. "Logan, this isn't just about you," one of them said. "Our company's reputation is on the line. Clients are asking questions." Another chimed in, "You have to distance yourself from her. We can't afford this kind of distraction right now." Logan stood at the head of the table, his expression calm but firm. "This is my personal life," he said evenly. "It doesn't affect how I run this company." "Perception is reality," another partner countered. "And right now, the perception isn't good." That evening, Logan arrived at Sophia's apartment, determined to reassure her. But when she opened the door, he immediately noticed the packed suitcase near the couch. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. Sophia looked at him, her eyes heavy with regret. "I'm leaving, Logan. This has gone too far." "Leaving?" Logan stepped inside, his disbelief evident. "You're letting some tabloid dictate your life?" "This isn't just about me," Sophia snapped, her voice breaking. "Look at what this is doing to you, your business, your reputation. You don't deserve this kind of fallout." Logan closed the gap between them, his tone softening. "Sophia, I don't care about the headlines or what people think. What we have is real. Don't let them take that away from us." Sophia shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You don't understand. I've been here before, watching everything crumble because of my name. I won't let that happen to you." "You're not your father," Logan said firmly. "And you're not alone anymore. We can face this together." Sophia looked away, her shoulders trembling. "I can't risk it, Logan. It's better if I walk away." Her words hit him like a blow. "Sophia, please." "I'm sorry," she whispered, stepping back. "But this is the only way." Logan watched helplessly as Sophia grabbed her suitcase and slipped out the door. The sound of it closing behind her was deafening. For days, Logan buried himself in his work, trying to distract himself from the ache Sophia's absence had left behind. But no matter how busy he kept himself, her voice, her laugh, her presence haunted him. Late one night, he sat alone in his penthouse, staring out at the city skyline. The scandal had already begun to die down, the headlines replaced by fresher gossip. Yet the damage to his heart remained. He thought about what his partners had said, about perception and reputation. But none of it mattered, not compared to what he had found with Sophia. She had brought something into his life he hadn't realized he was missing: authenticity, warmth, and a sense of purpose beyond success and wealth. Logan picked up his phone and made a call. The next day, Logan met with the bride, who had always been close to Sophia. "I need your help," he said simply. She smiled knowingly. "I was wondering how long it would take." "Do you know where she is?" Logan asked, hope flickering in his voice. "She mentioned going back to her hometown," the bride said. "There's an old art studio there where she used to paint. If she's anywhere, it's probably there." Logan nodded, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you." The small town was a stark contrast to Logan's usual surroundings. As he drove through its quiet streets, he felt a strange mix of nerves and determination. He found the art studio easily. It was a modest, weathered building with large windows that let in the natural light. Through the glass, he spotted her. Sophia was seated at an easel, her back to him, her brush moving across the canvas in deliberate strokes. For a moment, Logan just watched, his heart swelling at the sight of her doing something she clearly loved. Finally, he stepped inside, the bell above the door jingling softly. Sophia turned, her eyes widening in shock. "Logan," she said, standing. "What are you doing here?" "I came to bring you back," he said simply. Sophia frowned, crossing her arms. "I told you, Logan. This isn't going to work." Logan closed the distance between them. "You're wrong, Sophia. It already works. It works because I don't care about your past or the headlines or what anyone else thinks. I care about you." Sophia's resolve faltered as she looked into his eyes. "Logan, you can't run forever," Logan said gently. "And I'm not going anywhere, so you might as well stop running." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to hope. "Okay," she whispered. Logan smiled, pulling her into his arms. "Okay," he echoed. Together they stood in the quiet studio, a sense of peace settling over them as they embraced the second chance they both deserved. The gallery hummed with quiet energy as guests wandered through, admiring the carefully curated exhibit. Each piece was tied together by a theme of resilience, growth, and transformation. At the center of the exhibit was the highlight of the evening, a striking painting of a woman standing tall against a stormy backdrop, her eyes fierce and unyielding. Sophia stood near the entrance, watching as visitors marveled at the artwork. She had no idea who the artist was or how the piece had come to the gallery, but something about it felt deeply personal. The gallery owner approached her with a knowing smile. "There's someone here who'd like to speak with you," he said, nodding toward the far end of the room. Sophia turned, her breath catching as she saw Logan standing there in a tailored suit, his hands clasped in front of him. "Logan," she said, walking toward him. "What are you doing here?" Logan smiled warmly. "You didn't think I'd let you have an exhibit like this without being part of it, did you?" Sophia tilted her head, confused. "What do you mean?" Logan gestured toward the centerpiece painting. "That's yours. I commissioned it for you." Sophia's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes welling up as she looked at the painting again. "You did this for me." "Every brushstroke," Logan said, his voice soft, "was meant to show how I see you, strong, beautiful, and capable of standing through any storm." As the room quieted, Logan turned to address the guests. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began, his voice carrying across the gallery. "This exhibit is about resilience and the power to redefine yourself, no matter where you've come from or what you've been through." His eyes found Sophia's and he continued. "Sophia Bennett has spent so long hiding who she is, but to me, she's perfect just as she is. Her past doesn't define her, her heart, her courage, and her talent do. And I've been lucky enough to see that firsthand." Sophia's tears spilled over as Logan stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "I don't care about your name or your past, Sophia. I care about you. I always have and I always will." Sophia's heart swelled as she searched his face, finding nothing but sincerity and love. "You didn't just see me, Logan," she whispered. "You believed in me, and that means everything." The room erupted in applause as Logan took her hand, leading her to the center of the gallery. Months later, Logan stood on the sprawling estate in Napa Valley, the same one where they had first met. Friends and family gathered under a canopy of twinkling lights as the sun set over the vineyards. Logan took Sophia's hand, his eyes never leaving hers as he spoke. "Sophia, from the moment you burst through those doors, late and flustered, you turned my life upside down. I didn't know then how much you'd come to mean to me, but now I can't imagine my life without you. Will you let me spend the rest of it making you happy?" Sophia smiled through her tears. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. 1,000 times yes. Their wedding day was a celebration of love, resilience, and second chances. The ceremony was intimate, filled with laughter, heartfelt speeches, and the warmth of a close-knit group of loved ones. As they shared their first dance under a canopy of string lights, Sophia rested her head against Logan's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Thank you for chasing me," she whispered. Logan smiled, his arms tightening around her. "It was the easiest decision I ever made." The night stretched on, filled with joy and the promise of a new beginning. For Logan and Sophia, it wasn't just the start of a marriage, it was the start of a life built on love, trust, and the belief that together they could weather any storm. As Logan and Sophia danced under the glowing lights, their story reminds us that love has the power to heal, transform, and bring out the best in us. From a chance meeting at a wedding to overcoming secrets and scandals, they prove that true love is worth fighting for. If this heartwarming story touched you, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who believes in the magic of love and second chances. Subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories channel for more stories that inspire, move, and remind us of the beauty in life's unexpected moments. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss another tale of love and resilience. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.
Millionaire single dad. Sees waitress teaching his nonverbal son to speak. What he does next changes her life forever. The rain came down in torrents, drumming against the windows of the small-town diner. Inside, the fluorescent lights flickered slightly, casting a dull glow over the mostly empty booths. Only a few stragglers nursed their coffee cups, watching the storm rage through the glass. Stephen Brooks pushed open the door, the bell above jingling half-heartedly. Water dripped from his long coat as he guided his 5-year-old son Oliver inside. The boy clutched his hand tightly, his wide eyes darting nervously around the unfamiliar, noisy environment. "Table for 2, the waitress behind the counter called out, her voice warm but loud enough to make Oliver flinch. Stephen nodded curtly and steered Oliver toward a booth near the window. He helped the boy into the seat and slid in across from him. Oliver immediately began to rock slightly, humming under his breath, his small hands flapping once, then again. Stephen leaned forward, speaking softly. "It is okay, buddy. Just breathe. We will be out of here soon." The clatter of dishes from the kitchen made Oliver startle, and then a loud laugh from a nearby table pushed him over the edge. He let out a high-pitched scream, scrambled out of the booth, and fell to the floor. His arms flailed, and he began hitting the ground, overwhelmed and inconsolable. Stephen moved instantly, trying to pick him up, murmuring soothing words that barely registered against the chaos. Before he could lift Oliver, a figure dropped down beside them. It was a young woman, wearing a stained apron and an exhausted ponytail, but her face was calm, her movements slow and deliberate. "Hey there, buddy," she said softly, pulling a laminated picture card from her pocket and holding it up, a cartoon of a smiling face with the word "breathe" printed underneath. Oliver froze, staring at the card. His flailing slowed. The woman placed her hand on her own chest, exaggerating a deep breath in, then out. She tapped the picture again, smiling gently. Oliver mimicked her motion, taking a shaky breath. Stephen watched, stunned, as his son calmed down enough to sit up, his small body trembling but no longer in a full meltdown. The woman, Hannah, according to her name tag, smiled at Oliver and offered him a soft rubber toy from her apron pocket. Stephen's shock hardened into anger. "What do you think you are doing?" he barked. Hannah looked up, startled. "I was just," she began. "You do not get to touch my son without asking," Stephen snapped, his voice cutting through the diner. Heads turned. "I was trying to help," Hannah said, frowning. "He was overwhelmed. I have seen it before. I thought—" "You thought you would swoop in and play hero? Pity the poor artistic boy and his incompetent father?" Stephen's voice was sharp, brittle with something deeper than anger. Hannah's cheeks flushed. She stood slowly, the picture card still in her hand. "I was not pitying him," she said, her voice steady. "And I was not pitying you. I was trying to speak his language when you could not." Stephen's fists clenched at his sides. "You think you know anything about him, about us?" he ground out. "I know enough to see a boy who is scared," Hannah said quietly, "and a father who is too angry to see past his own pride." The words landed like a slap. Stephen opened his mouth to retaliate but stopped himself. Oliver, still sitting on the floor, was looking up at him, wide-eyed, silent. Hannah knelt again, ignoring Stephen, and spoke softly to Oliver. "You are doing great, sweetheart," she said. "Really brave." Oliver reached out a tentative hand toward the rubber toy still lying near. He grabbed it, clutching it tightly to his chest. Stephen swallowed hard, feeling the judgmental stares of the other diners pressing in around him. "Get up," he said to Oliver, his voice rough. Oliver obeyed, sliding back into the booth with the toy gripped tightly in one hand. Stephen tossed a crumpled bill onto the table and turned toward the door. Hannah watched them go, her heart aching. She had seen it before, the frustration, the helplessness buried under anger. She knew it too well because she had lived it herself once. She blinked rapidly, forcing back tears. Stephen pushed the door open into the roaring night, barely noticing the rain that pelted him as he guided Oliver back to the car. Inside the diner, the murmur of conversation resumed, but the tension lingered. Hannah picked up the laminated picture card from the floor and wiped it off with the corner of her apron. "Poor kid," she whispered. She glanced at the door again, but they were already gone. She did not expect to see them again. She certainly did not expect that this brief, disastrous meeting would be the beginning of everything she had ever dreamed of, and everything she had ever feared. The rain had stopped by the next afternoon, leaving the streets slick and glistening under a weak winter sun. Stephen Brooks sat behind the wheel of his black SUV, his hands tight on the steering wheel as he waited for the light to change. Oliver was buckled quietly in the back seat, humming a soft, tuneless song under his breath. Stephen stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, but his mind was a million miles away. He had not been able to shake the encounter at the diner. Hannah's words echoed in his head, sharper than he cared to admit. A father too angry to see past his own pride. He hated how close to the mark she had hit. He had spent the whole night convincing himself he had been right to snap at her, that no stranger had any right to step into his son's world without his permission. But deep down, a gnawing guilt had taken root, growing with every hour that passed. Oliver had calmed for her. Oliver had smiled at her. That reality was harder to swallow than any bruised pride. The light turned green, and Stephen eased the car forward. As they rolled past the diner, he caught movement in the rearview mirror. Oliver had turned in his seat, pressing his small hand against the window, peering back toward the familiar red sign. Stephen frowned. It was not the first time. Every time they passed the place, Oliver's attention locked onto it, as if hoping to catch a glimpse of something, or someone. Stephen shook his head and kept driving. At home, the afternoon unfolded in its usual quiet chaos. Oliver stacked blocks in careful, color-coded towers. Stephen answered emails, paced the kitchen, made half-hearted attempts at conversation that went nowhere. But the image of Oliver's face, lit with that tiny flicker of hope, would not leave him alone. That night, as Stephen tucked Oliver into bed, he found a small scrap of napkin clutched in the boy's hand. A crude, childish drawing, stick figures, a smiling woman with a big messy ponytail, and a little boy beside her. Hannah and Oliver. Stephen sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. "You like her, huh, buddy?" he said quietly. Oliver did not respond with words, of course, but his face said enough. His smile was small, shy, but real. Stephen felt something twist deep in his chest. It had been months, no, years, since Oliver had shown that kind of spontaneous joy around someone new. Stephen brushed a hand through Oliver's soft hair, his throat tightening. Maybe he had been too harsh. Maybe Hannah had seen something in Oliver that even he had overlooked. The next day, as they drove into town, Stephen watched Oliver carefully. Sure enough, as they passed the diner, Oliver leaned against the window, eyes scanning the parking lot with a quiet yearning. Stephen tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He did not want to admit it. He did not want to need help. He did not want to let anyone, especially someone who barely knew them, into the fragile, carefully controlled world he had built for his son. But he could not deny the truth. Hannah had made an impression. Not just on Oliver, on him too. He exhaled slowly, turning the car down another street, away from the diner. His heart thudded heavily in his chest. He was not ready to face her, not yet. Not when he could still hear the echo of his own angry voice ringing through that small diner, cutting down the only person who had reached out with pure kindness. He needed to think. He needed to be sure. But in the back seat, Oliver tapped his little hands lightly against the window, humming softly, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth, and Stephen realized, with a sinking inevitability, that it was not about him at all. It was about Oliver. It had always been about Oliver, and maybe, just maybe, the boy deserved the chance to chase that small, fragile hope, even if Stephen himself was terrified of what it might cost. The days dragged on, and the weight of guilt pressed heavier on Stephen Brooks' shoulders. Every evening he watched Oliver retreat deeper into himself, his energy fizzling away like a dying spark. The little boy who had once stacked blocks and danced to cartoons now sat listlessly by the window, staring out as if waiting for someone who never came. Stephen tried everything he could think of. Trips to the park, new toys, favorite foods. Nothing worked. Oliver's smiles became rarer, his humming softer, almost mournful. It gnawed at Stephen worse than any sleepless night. On a chilly Saturday morning, Stephen watched from the kitchen doorway as Oliver sat cross-legged on the living room rug, clutching the worn napkin with the stick figure drawing. His tiny thumb traced the image over and over, his lips forming a wordless murmur. Stephen knew what he had to do. He hated it. He hated the way it made him feel like a failure, as a father, as a protector. But Oliver was slipping away, and if he did nothing, he would lose him completely. Stephen grabbed his coat, his mind already racing with excuses he would tell himself later. This was for Oliver, not for Hannah. It had nothing to do with her. The diner bell jingled as he pushed through the door. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of coffee and bacon. A few regulars looked up but quickly returned to their meals. Hannah stood behind the counter, wiping down a coffee machine, her ponytail swinging as she worked. She did not notice him at first. Stephen hesitated, his pride clashing violently with his desperation. Then he cleared his throat. Hannah looked up, and her body tensed the moment she saw him. For a long beat, neither spoke. Stephen swallowed hard. "Can we talk?" he asked, voice low. Hannah's eyes narrowed slightly, but she nodded toward an empty booth. Stephen slid into the seat, feeling awkward and out of place. Hannah stood across from him, arms crossed defensively. "I am not here to fight," Stephen said quickly. "Good," Hannah said coolly, "because I do not have the energy." Stephen forced himself to meet her gaze. "My son," he began, then paused, searching for the right words. "Oliver. He has not been the same since that night." Hannah's face softened slightly. "He misses you," Stephen said. "He looks for you every time we drive past this place. He smiles when he sees brown hair." He exhaled sharply. "He drew you." Something flickered in Hannah's eyes, something tender but cautious. "I was wrong," Stephen admitted, the words scraping against his pride like sandpaper. "About you, about what you were trying to do." Hannah said nothing, waiting. "I am asking," Stephen said slowly, "if you would. Come spend a little time with him. One afternoon, no strings, just see him." Hannah blinked, visibly caught off guard. "You want me to babysit?" she asked, half incredulous. "No," Stephen said quickly. "No, just be there. Talk to him, however you did before." Hannah hesitated, her heart pounding. She should say no. Every instinct told her to stay away. She had her own troubles, her own fragile world barely held together. She did not have room for rich men with broken hearts and bigger egos. But then she thought of Oliver's face, the way his small hands had fumbled for the picture card, the tentative smile he had given her, and she remembered what it felt like to be needed, even in the smallest way. "I do not know," Hannah began, voice uncertain. "Please," Stephen said, and the rawness in his voice startled them both. Hannah glanced toward the kitchen, where her boss was shouting something about a broken fryer, toward the windows where rain threatened to fall again, toward the future she had long stopped believing in. She looked back at Stephen. He was not begging, he was not commanding, he was simply a father asking for help, stripped of all the armor he usually wore. "When?" she asked softly. Stephen exhaled, relief flashing across his face. "Tomorrow afternoon. At my place?" Hannah bit her lip. "Okay," she said finally, "but just for a few hours." Stephen nodded. "Thank you." As he stood to leave, he hesitated. "And Hannah?" he said. She looked up. "I am sorry. For what I said?" She gave a small, tired smile. "Just do better," she said. Stephen dipped his head and left without another word. Hannah watched him go, her heart pounding for reasons she could not quite explain. She wiped her hands on her apron and turned back to the counter, pretending her world had not just tilted slightly on its axis. In the back of her mind, though, a small voice whispered, maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something different. Sunday afternoon arrived, cloaked in hesitant sunlight. Stephen stood by the living room window, arms folded, watching the driveway with a knot of tension lodged in his chest. Oliver sat cross-legged on the floor, lining up a row of toy cars with meticulous care. Every few seconds he glanced toward the front door. Stephen checked the clock again. Hannah was supposed to be here 10 minutes ago. He was beginning to wonder if she had changed her mind when a small, battered sedan rolled into the driveway. Stephen exhaled slowly and moved to the door. Hannah stepped out, a canvas tote slung over one shoulder. She wore jeans and a faded blue sweater, her hair pulled back loosely. She looked different here. Out of place, but somehow fitting, like a splash of real life against the muted tones of his carefully controlled world. Stephen opened the door before she could knock. "Hi," Hannah said, a little breathless. "Hi," Stephen replied stiffly, stepping aside to let her in. Oliver's head popped up at the sound of her voice, his eyes widened, and a smile broke across his face, small but unmistakable. "Hey, buddy," Hannah said warmly, crouching down to his level. She pulled a small laminated card from her tote, showing a picture of two hands forming a sign. "This means friend," she said, signing the motion as she spoke. Oliver stared at her for a moment, then slowly, clumsily, mimicked the gesture. Stephen felt something catch in his chest. Hannah grinned. "Perfect," she said. Stephen hovered awkwardly by the doorway, feeling like a stranger in his own house. "Where would be good for us to work?" Hannah asked, standing. Stephen gestured toward the spacious living room. "Here is fine." Hannah nodded and sat cross-legged on the floor, unpacking a few more cards, a small whiteboard, and a set of brightly colored markers. Oliver edged closer, curiosity lighting up his features. For the next hour, Hannah worked with Oliver, showing him simple signs paired with pictures and sounds. She spoke slowly, clearly, never raising her voice, never rushing him. She clapped and cheered softly whenever he got something right. Stephen watched from the kitchen doorway, his heart in his throat. Oliver responded in ways Stephen had never seen before. He pointed, he nodded, he even tried to mimic sounds, his little face scrunched in concentration. At one point, Hannah drew a simple house on the whiteboard and signed home. Oliver tapped the picture twice, then looked up at her and smiled. Stephen felt a prick behind his eyes and blinked it away. He knew he should be grateful, and he was, but along with the gratitude came a sharp, unexpected pang of jealousy. For so long, it had just been him and Oliver against the world. They had their own clumsy rhythm, their own silent language. Now, here was this woman, this stranger, breaking through the walls he had never managed to breach. Stephen swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay back, to let it happen. Then, something extraordinary happened. Oliver stood up, clutching the whiteboard in his small hands. He crossed the room and tugged insistently at Stephen's sleeve. Stephen knelt down automatically. Oliver held up the board, his face shining with excitement. Stephen looked. On the board, scrawled in uneven but unmistakable letters, were three simple words. "I like Dad." Stephen's breath caught painfully. He looked at Oliver, at his bright, eager eyes, and felt something inside him shatter and heal at the same time. "You did this?" he whispered. Oliver nodded proudly. Behind them, Hannah watched with a soft smile, her heart swelling. Stephen pulled Oliver into a fierce hug, burying his face in his son's hair. "Thank you," he mouthed to Hannah over Oliver's head. She gave a small nod, blinking back tears. For a few moments, the room was filled with nothing but the sound of breathing, the fragile, precious quiet of a new bridge being built. When Oliver finally pulled away, he grabbed Hannah's hand too, tugging her toward Stephen, as if trying to close the circle. Stephen hesitated, then reached out and took her hand. It was warm, steady, real. They stood there, connected by a child who had once been locked inside his own silent world and was now, step by step, finding his way out. Stephen realized something else then, something that filled him with both hope and fear. He needed her, not just for Oliver, but for himself. The thought terrified him, and yet he could not look away. Later, after Hannah packed up her materials and promised to return next weekend, Stephen stood by the door and watched her drive away. Oliver pressed his nose against the window, waving his small hand. Stephen smiled, but deep inside, a seed of unease took root. He had spent so long being everything for Oliver. Protector, teacher, voice. What if Oliver did not need him the same way anymore? What if Stephen was the one left behind? The fear whispered in his ear, dark and insistent. He pushed it down. For now all that mattered was the joy in his son's eyes. For now all that mattered was that, for the first time in a long time, their world was expanding, and maybe, just maybe, there was enough room in it for all three of them. The following weeks slipped into a soft rhythm. Every Sunday, Hannah arrived at Stephen's house, her tote full of teaching materials and her smile brightening the entire space. Under her gentle guidance, Oliver blossomed, mastering new signs, stringing hesitant words together, laughing more freely than Stephen had ever seen. Stephen watched it all with a strange mix of wonder and growing vulnerability. He told himself it was fine, but the more Hannah became part of their lives, the more Stephen realized he was relying on her. Not just for Oliver's progress, but for the way she softened the sharp edges of their once lonely world. Not everyone saw it that way. "You need to be careful," Julia, Stephen's sister, warned one rainy afternoon as they sat in his kitchen. "You barely know her." Stephen frowned. "She has been good for Oliver." "Or maybe she sees an opportunity," Julia said, setting her cup down hard. "Rich, lonely, single dad, vulnerable kid. It happens." Stephen bristled but said nothing. Still, her words gnawed at him. Julia, unwilling to leave it alone, quietly hired a private investigator. When she received a short, stitched-together recording, Hannah talking to a co-worker about money and Stephen's wealth, Julia felt justified. Without hesitation, she forwarded it to Stephen. Later that night, Stephen listened to it alone in his office, the room swallowed by darkness. "He is rich. If I play this right, maybe I will not have to worry about money ever again." The words slithered into his ears, cold and damning. Stephen sat frozen, disbelief battling heartbreak. Was it all a lie? The laughter? The way Oliver lit up around her? The following Sunday, Stephen waited by the window, arms crossed tightly. When Hannah's car pulled into the driveway, Oliver squealed, running for the door. Stephen stayed rooted in place. When Hannah stepped inside, her face lit up at the sight of Oliver. "Hey, little man," she called, ruffling his hair. Stephen's voice sliced through the room. "We need to talk." Hannah blinked, startled. "Okay," she said, setting her tote down. Stephen strode across the room, pulling out his phone. He hit play. The distorted, cruel version of Hannah's voice filled the space. Hannah's face paled. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "Does it matter?" Stephen snapped. "Was any of it real? Or was it all just about the money?" Oliver stood between them, sensing the tension. "No," Hannah said, shaking her head, desperation rising. "Stephen, it is not what you think." "Then what is it?" Stephen demanded. "Because from where I stand, it looks like you used my son to get to me." Tears filled Hannah's eyes. "You think I would use Oliver?" she choked. "You think I could—" "I think you should leave," Stephen said coldly. Oliver whimpered, clutching Hannah's sleeve, confused. Hannah knelt, her voice breaking. "You are so brave, little one. Do not ever forget that." She kissed the top of his head and stood, her hands trembling. Facing Stephen, she said quietly, "I thought you were different. But you are just another man who sees only what he is afraid to see." Without waiting for his reply, Hannah grabbed her tote and fled into the gray afternoon. Stephen stood motionless, the phone still in his hand. Oliver whimpered again, tugging at Stephen's pant leg. "Dada!" he whispered, his voice full of confusion and heartbreak. Stephen knelt and scooped him up, but Oliver wriggled away, running to the door, pressing his small hands against the glass, staring at the empty driveway. Stephen slumped back on his heels, numb. The house felt unbearably hollow. He told himself he had protected his son, protected their fragile world, but deep down an aching truth gnawed at him. He had made a terrible, irreversible mistake. The days that followed were darker than any Stephen Brooks had known. Oliver barely spoke, even with the few signs he had mastered. He no longer reached for his toys, no longer smiled when cartoons flickered across the television screen. He sat by the window most of the day, holding the worn napkin drawing of him and Hannah, staring out as if hoping she might still appear. Stephen tried everything: favorite meals, trips to the park, new toys. But Oliver remained distant, locked behind walls even higher than before. At night, Stephen sat awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by the look on Hannah's face as she had walked away. It had not been anger, it had been heartbreak. And in the moments when Stephen was brave enough to face it, he knew the heartbreak was not just hers, it was Oliver's too. One afternoon, as rain misted against the windows, Stephen sat at his desk, mindlessly scrolling through emails he could not focus on. His sister Julia had sent another message, this one titled, "More info on Hannah." With a sigh, Stephen clicked it open. Attached was a link to a longer audio file, the original unedited recording. For a long time, Stephen simply stared at the screen. Then, with a shaking hand, he hit play. Hannah's voice filled the room again, but this time the full conversation was different. "So, how is the new gig?" the coworker asked, laughter in their tone. "It is not a gig," Hannah said, her voice firm but tired. "It is just this little boy. He is amazing. I do not even know if I am helping him, but when he smiles at me—" She trailed off, emotion thickening her words. "It feels like maybe I am doing something good for once." "And the dad?" the coworker teased. Hannah laughed softly. "He is complicated, but he loves that kid more than anything. I would not touch that trust for all the money in the world." The coworker chuckled again. "Still, nice that he is rich, right?" Hannah's reply came swift and sharp. "Money does not fix anything. Not what he is going through, not what that boy needs." Stephen sat frozen, the blood draining from his face. The words echoed in his ears, erasing every ugly assumption he had let take root. He had not just doubted Hannah, he had betrayed her. He had betrayed Oliver. Stephen shoved his chair back violently, pacing the room like a caged animal. His hands shook with anger, at himself, at Julia, and the way he had let fear rule over trust. He thought of Oliver's small hands pulling at Hannah's sleeve, of the first time Oliver had smiled without prompting, of the way he had signed "friend" with clumsy pride. All gone now, because of him. Stephen scrubbed a hand over his face, sinking onto the couch as a heavy, inescapable guilt settled on his chest. In trying to protect his son, he had shattered the first real connection Oliver had ever built outside their tiny, isolated world, and Oliver knew. He knew something had been broken. That night, Stephen tried to coax Oliver to eat, but the boy simply shook his head and turned away. Stephen knelt beside him, feeling helpless. "I am sorry, buddy," he whispered. "I am so sorry." Oliver did not respond. He only hugged the crumpled napkin closer to his chest. Stephen sat down heavily against the wall, dropping his head into his hands. For the first time in years, he cried. Not the silent, hidden tears he allowed himself when no one was looking. Real, gasping sobs that left him raw and empty. He cried for his son. He cried for the woman he had hurt, and he cried for the man he had become, the one too afraid to believe in something good when it was offered freely. When the tears finally stopped, he wiped his face and looked at Oliver. The little boy met his gaze, solemn and steady. Stephen nodded slowly. "I am going to fix this," he promised. "I am going to bring her back." Oliver tilted his head slightly, a glimmer of hope flickering in his eyes. It was the only answer Stephen needed. The next morning, Stephen made the calls he should have made weeks ago. He confronted Julia, furious and unrelenting, forcing her to admit to her manipulations. She apologized, but the words tasted hollow. This was not something he could undo with an apology. It was something he had to earn back. Stephen packed his small bag, just essentials, and strapped Oliver into the back seat of his car. As he pulled out of the driveway, he felt something he had not allowed himself to feel in a long time: hope. He did not know exactly where Hannah was, but he would search every diner, every coffee shop, every roadside motel if he had to, because she was not just someone Oliver needed. She was someone they both needed, and this time, he would not let fear steal that chance away. Stephen drove for hours, the world outside blurring into endless stretches of cracked asphalt and dim neon signs. He stopped at every roadside diner, every crumbling motel, asking the same question. "Have you seen her? Brown hair, about this tall, kind smile." Most shook their heads. Some barely looked up. Oliver rode silently in the back seat, clutching the worn napkin drawing. His presence grounded Stephen, reminding him why he could not give up, even as exhaustion clawed at him. By nightfall, they rolled into a tired little town skirting the highway, its main street lined with flickering streetlights. Stephen's eyes scanned the storefronts until they landed on a dingy bakery, Maggie's Pies, its windows fogged with steam. Through the glass, he caught a glimpse of a woman in a flour-dusted apron. His heart kicked hard against his ribs. It was her. Without thinking, he parked, grabbed Oliver's hand, and pushed through the bakery door, the bell above jingling weakly. The warm scent of cinnamon and sugar wrapped around them, but Stephen barely noticed. Hannah looked up, freezing when she saw them. A tray slipped slightly from her hands. Before Stephen could speak, Oliver let go and ran across the room, arms wide. "Home!" he cried, voice clear and sure. Hannah gasped, dropping the tray with a clatter. She dropped to her knees, arms outstretched, and Oliver barreled into her embrace. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she hugged him tightly. Stephen stood frozen, every bottled emotion crashing over him. Hannah pulled back slightly, cupping Oliver's face in her hands. "You said a word," she whispered, voice trembling. Oliver nodded solemnly, burying his face against her shoulder. When Hannah looked up, her eyes met Stephen's. No words were needed. Everything was said in the forgiveness and overwhelming love shining between them. Stephen crossed the bakery in 3 long strides, kneeling beside them. His hand brushed against Hannah's as he stroked Oliver's hair. She did not pull away. Instead, she smiled, a raw, breathtaking smile. And Stephen knew in that instant he could not lose her again. The words came without thought. "Marry me," he said, his voice rough. "Right here, right now. No big speeches, no second chances, just marry me." Hannah blinked, stunned. Her hand tightened around Oliver's, tears glistening in her eyes. "Stephen," she breathed. "I know I am not perfect," he said hoarsely, "but you're the best thing that ever happened to me. To him, to both of us." A broken, joyful laugh escaped her. She wiped at her cheeks. "You do not even have a ring," she teased, voice trembling. Stephen grinned for the first time in what felt like forever. "I will get you one tomorrow. 10 if you want." Hannah looked down at Oliver, who watched them with wide, hopeful eyes. She cupped Stephen's face gently, leaning in until their foreheads touched. "Yes," she whispered. "Of course, yes." Stephen pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly as Oliver squeezed between them, giggling with delight. Outside, the rain fell softly, blurring the town into a watercolored dream. Inside, under the flickering yellow light and the smell of warm bread, a broken family found itself again. And this time, nothing, not fear, not pride, not even the past, could tear them apart. They stayed like that for a long time, laughing and crying, holding each other, as if the rest of the world had fallen away. Eventually Maggie, the elderly bakery owner, peeked from the kitchen with a bemused smile. "You gonna buy a pie or what?" she teased, hands on her hips. Stephen laughed, wiping his face. "2 pies," he said, "the biggest you have." Maggie chuckled and disappeared back into the kitchen, humming. Hannah leaned against Stephen, her head resting on his shoulder. Oliver nestled warmly between them. Stephen kissed her forehead, feeling her sigh against him. This was it, not the life he had once imagined, not the life he had clung to out of fear. Something better, something real, something earned. As he sat there, surrounded by the 2 people he loved most, Stephen understood something simple and true. Home was not a place, it was a feeling, and he had finally found it. Spring unfolded gently across the countryside, painting the hills with wild flowers and draping the sky in endless blue. Nestled between the fields was a small farm, its white fence newly painted, its porch sagging slightly under the weight of new beginnings. Stephen Brooks stood on the porch, a mug of coffee warming his hands, watching the morning unfold. Inside, laughter echoed, a sound once foreign to him, now the rhythm of his life. Hannah had turned the old barn into something beautiful, a center for children like Oliver called Hope Haven. Parents came from miles around, drawn by stories of miracles. They never knew Stephen was the silent benefactor who had bought the land, paid every bill. It was Hannah's dream brought to life, and he was happy to stay in the background. Oliver thrived here. Gone was the boy who cowered in corners. Now he ran freely through the fields, his laughter carrying on the breeze, speaking more with each passing day. Today was not about therapy or renovations. Today was about family. The wedding was simple, exactly as they had wanted. No grand venues, no endless guest lists. Just them, the land that had cradled their healing, and a handful of people who mattered. Stephen adjusted his tie nervously, glancing down the path, and saw her. Hannah walked barefoot through the grass, a crown of wildflowers resting on her head, her dress flowing with the breeze. She looked like she had stepped from one of Oliver's drawings, soft, radiant, breathtaking. Oliver ran ahead, clutching her hand tightly, his face beaming. Stephen's heart swelled so full he thought it might break. They met under an ancient oak tree, its arms stretched wide like a blessing. Maggie from the bakery, who insisted on officiating, stood waiting, grinning over a thick, battered book. "Ready?" she whispered. Stephen and Hannah exchanged a look, laughter bubbling between them. No words were needed. They were already home. The ceremony was short, sweet, and perfectly imperfect, Oliver interrupting to hand Stephen a dandelion, the wind tugging Hannah's hair, Maggie forgetting half her speech and laughing through the rest. It was perfect. When Maggie finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Stephen needed no encouragement. He leaned in, kissing Hannah with a love so fierce and sure, the world seemed to tilt beneath them. When they finally pulled apart, Oliver clapped his hands, giggling, and then, in the hush that followed, Oliver looked up at Hannah with bright, solemn eyes. "Mom," he said clearly. The world stopped. Hannah gasped, dropping to her knees as tears sprang. Oliver launched himself into her arms and Stephen dropped down beside them, wrapping them both into a tangle of laughter, tears, and unstoppable love. They stayed there as the light faded, as the sky deepened to a soft velvet blue. Later, they sat on the porch swing, Oliver curled asleep between them. They watched the stars blink into being, the air heavy with the scent of honeysuckle and fresh earth. Then, with a sudden sweep, a shooting star cut across the sky, burning bright and fierce against the night. Hannah caught her breath and pointed. "Look," she whispered. Stephen followed her gaze, smiling. "A wish?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, her voice thick with emotion. "No," she said, "a promise." Stephen tightened his arm around her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Whatever comes," he murmured, "whatever storms, we hold on to this." "This," Hannah echoed, brushing her fingers through Oliver's hair. "Our messy, beautiful, imperfect family." Stephen closed his eyes, feeling the truth of it settle deep into his bones. They had been lost, they had broken, they had almost given up. But love, real, stubborn, imperfect love, had stitched them back together in ways he had never dared to dream. He looked down at the two people he loved most, their faces glowing in the soft starlight. Home was not a place, it was a feeling, and they had finally found it. Above them, the shooting star burned out, leaving the vast, endless sky, and three steady hearts beating stronger together than they had ever been alone. In a world that often feels overwhelming, where hope can seem just out of reach, Stephen, Hannah, and little Oliver remind us of a powerful truth. Family is not about perfection. It is about love. It is about standing together through the storms, healing the broken places, and building a home from laughter, forgiveness, and second chances. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful journey of healing, trust, and unconditional love. If stories like this touch your heart and remind you of the resilience we all carry within, we invite you to subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Here, we share tales that inspire, heal, and celebrate the extraordinary power of human connection. Stay with us for more real, emotional stories that speak to the soul. Until next time, may you always believe in the beauty of second chances.